In this video, I'll be sharing more with you about ClickUp Hierarchy, what are all the levels of ClickUp Hierarchy, and what do you need to keep in mind in order to make it work for your specific use case. So let's dive into this. ClickUp Hierarchy contains 5 main levels of the hierarchy, and those levels are tasks, then we go to the lists, then we have folders, then we have spaces, and at the very top we have our workspace, which is essentially our ClickUp account. Now, as you can see on this diagram, we're going to dive deeper into each of this level and see how all of these levels of the hierarchy are kind of interconnected between each other and how we can think about them so that we can build structures in ClickUp that support the way we do work in our businesses. And I want to start discussing ClickUp Hierarchy from the very bottom of the hierarchy, not starting from the top, because many times you see, like for example in ClickUp University, that people explain ClickUp Hierarchy beginning with the workspace. They start telling you, what are all the settings inside the ClickUp account that you can set up, or what are all the different plans that you can choose from. And in my opinion, we should start from the very bottom, which becomes the foundation of your ClickUp account, which is your ClickUp task. So in this example, task becomes the building block of your ClickUp account and of the ClickUp structure that you're building. Now, something to be mindful of, because initially when ClickUp was released, again, that was the tool for managing the work, right? For managing your tasks and your action items. So people kind of got stuck with this idea and this concept of actually tracking their action items and tracking their tasks inside ClickUp. And over the years, ClickUp evolved and it added a lot of functionality to enable us not only to track the tasks that we have to do, but also to track other types of things that we want to track inside our business processes or throughout different workflows that we're doing inside the business. Those things can be different deliverables. They can be different projects. They can be leads. They can be customers. They can be different locations that we have in our business. It technically can be anything you want to track inside your business. It can be converted or kind of created as a ClickUp task. It's just that this name of a task is kind of confusing. So I just want to make sure that you're on the same page with me and you understand that ClickUp tasks are not necessarily the actual tasks. They can be anything that we want to track inside our ClickUp account. It's just to give you a quick idea of what I mean by that. For example, here on the left, you can see the admin tasks list that I created. Now, all the tasks here in this list are going to be the actual tasks that I have to do, right? For some of them, I need to prepare onboarding welcome materials. I need to refresh company templates. I need to update salary benchmarks. Now, all of these things is something that I have to actually do. Again, I'm assigned as an assignee for all these tasks, and I have a specific due date by when I have to complete this tasks. Now, what I mean by tracking not the actual tasks, but for example, deliverables of the project is, for example, with this hiring and onboarding folder that I have over here. There are 2 main lists. One of them is called job openings. The other one is called applications. Now, inside the applications, the tasks that I have are not the actual tasks. They are not the actual action items for me to complete, but rather every single tasks represent a separate application that is coming from a different applicant. This way, I can easily see all the applications that were received, let's say for the last week or the last months, and absolutely the same happens with the job opening. I'm just tracking a different, not an actual action item or not the actual task for myself, but some sort of a deliverable that is part of the hiring and onboarding process in this specific example. As I said, ClickUp tasks are essentially our building blocks. And as we understood that those tasks can represent anything we want inside our ClickUp account, let's move to the next level of the hierarchy, which is going to be lists. Now, lists are created in ClickUp essentially to group our tasks together. The main idea behind lists is that you're grouping similar tasks together, or tasks that are related to the same, whether it's a project, whether it's a location, or however you want to group those tasks by, but they have to be have some similarities or have some kind of relationship between each other. So those lists do not just have random tasks, and sometimes that happens when you create, again, a bunch of tasks inside a list. That's not the best way to structure the work. Again, we want lists to group tasks together by meaning. So in the previous example that I showed you with the job openings and applications, you can clearly see the way I'm breaking down the list. Now, again, job openings, or for example, applications list in this example includes all the tasks that are applications, right? none of them are job openings, none of them are action items for me, or I don't know, none of them are deliverables for the other projects. Those are only applications. There is a dedicated place, which is a list where all those applications are kind of located and stored. The same happens with the job openings. For example, this list does not contain any information about the applications. It doesn't contain any tasks or actual action items. It only contains job applications. So this is a dedicated place for that specific item for us to track. And the last example that I shared with you was admin tasks. So in this example, this list actually contains tasks that I have to do on a day-to-day basis, which are admin tasks for me. And again, as you can see here, I'm not mixing together job openings and applications and my action items inside the same list, but I'm rather splitting them into different locations to make it easier for me to manage them as ClickUp tasks, and that's kind of those building blocks of my ClickUp structure. There's a very important detail to mention here, is that tasks cannot exist without a list inside ClickUp. So whenever you're creating a new task or you're thinking about creating a new task, you have to have a dedicated place where that task is going to be stored. So this way, tasks and lists are kind of come hand in hand, and you are not able, again, to have tasks without lists. You can have lists without tasks, but this way they kind of do not make any sense to have inside your ClickUp setup or inside your ClickUp account. So again, be mindful of that whenever you're creating new tasks and whenever you're thinking about creating those structures inside your ClickUp account. Now, as we created a bunch of tasks and grouped them together into different lists, now we might want to group those lists together. So this is where the ClickUp folders come into play. And again, I'm not going to overcomplicate this concept of folders. Everyone is familiar with folders. You're just basically putting lists together into the folders. The main idea behind them, and this is what I mentioned when we were grouping tasks into lists, is that you group lists that are kind of relating to the same type of project. Maybe it's a separate same department, maybe it's the same initiative or a workflow, but they have to be somehow related so that you can put them inside the same folder. So this way your ClickUp structure actually makes sense. In my example that I showed you previously, I have a folder called Hiring and Onboarding, and inside this folder I have two separate lists where I group tasks together. One is for job openings that I showed you previously, and the other one is for applications. Now, I put those lists together just because those represent two main deliverables of the hiring and onboarding process. If you think about this, again, I need to draft and I need to post a job opening every time I'm hiring someone, and I also need to process all the applications that are coming through for that specific job opening. So again, these two lists represent the hiring and onboarding process and the main deliverables of that workflow. So this is why I group them together inside the same folder, which I called hiring and onboarding. Now the next level, and I like to think about these levels as some sort of different sized buckets, because when we're speaking about the list, again, this is going to be a small bucket. Now, when we discussed folders, that was a medium bucket, right? Where you could put the smaller bucket. And now we're discussing the space, which is the fourth level of the hierarchy. And essentially that's the biggest bucket that you have available inside your ClickUp account. And this is the bucket where you can put all your folders and all the spaces that you created inside that space. Now, the idea is really the same as we discussed with the folders and list, is group things together so that they make sense, right? So they relate to the same purpose or relate to the same part of the business, whether it's a specific workflow, maybe it's a specific location, maybe it's a different customer, whatever makes sense in your specific use case. But in my example that I showed you previously, over here, I grouped my hiring and onboarding folder where I have job openings and applications together with my HR admin tasks inside the same space, which I just simply called HR. Now, in this case, this space can represent everything that is related to human resources in my specific company, or maybe it is related, in your case, to a specific project, or maybe it is related to a different location or to a different market where you're doing business. So again, it can be really different things, but the main idea is to group those lists and folders together so they make sense logically when you're looking and working with these items inside your ClickUp account. Now, important thing to mention here is that sometimes lists can be created separately from the folders inside your spaces. So not always you might want to track or kind of group your list together into folders. Sometimes you can have a bunch of folders inside your space, but there is a need for you to create a separate list that tracks something different. In this example, you can create lists that are outside of the folders and are just part of the space. In my example that I showed you previously, again, I have my hiring and onboarding folder here, but I also, as you can see, when I close this folder, I also have an admin tasks list, which is not part of the folder, but part of the space. So this gives us a little bit more flexibility of how we can structure work. And the best way I use this list for really is, for example, in HR example here, I'm tracking all the admin tasks, right? Which are kind of, let's say, the department-wide list where we track all the admin tasks for HR. Another example can be tracking some deliverables that are department-wide, that are not specific to any project or any little process, but are maybe goals for our whole HR department. So this way, this list can play a good role in this specific structure. And as we went through the 4 levels of the hierarchy, which were tasks, then we grouped them into lists, lists were grouped into folders, and then folders eventually were grouped into spaces. Now we're coming to the last level of the hierarchy, which is the workspace. The workspace essentially represents your ClickUp account. And if I were to go into my example that I showed you previously, here in the left top corner, you can click on this drop down and it's gonna see, first of all, your workspace, right? And the workspace or the ClickUp account is actually what you're paying for. This is where your billing information is stored, or this is where you're inviting all your team members. And you can also see different workspace that you are part of. So the workspace is the highest level of the hierarchy, and it contains different spaces inside which you have folders with lists and tasks in them. Now, as the last part of the video, I want to explain you an analogy that I keep in mind when I think about structuring work in ClickUp, and this is an analogy of a waterfall. Now, if you think about this, the 3 main settings that we're using when we're building ClickUp structure is statuses, custom fields, and automations. And there are 3 main levels of the hierarchy when you can set this up. First, you can set it up on the space level. So statuses, custom fields, and automations can be added on the space level. It can also be added on the folder level as well as on the list level. And this analogy of the waterfall just helps me keep in mind that whatever I set up on the space level is also going to be applied to all the folders and lists inside that space. The same happens with a folder. Again, it falls kind of from the top down, right? So space is located at the very top of the waterfall, then we have the folder in the middle and the list at the very bottom. So if I set up something on the folder level, it's not going to be the space is not going to be affected, but the list underneath that folder is going to be affected. So again, keeping this analogy in mind just helps me structure ClickUp correctly and kind of see some potential issues in the structures that I'm building and presenting to other people and other teams. In the example I shared with you previously with the HR space and having the hiring onboarding folder inside that space, let me show you how that inheritance works with statuses, for example. So if I were to go and click on the 3 dots on the right of the space here and click on the task statuses, you can see that I have a status template, which is a custom, which contains of to do, in progress, and complete. Now I can close this on the space level, and now let me go, for example, to my admin tasks list. So here I'm clicking on the 3 dots. You can see I have the same task statuses setting, but now it is on the list level. And here I have a button that says inherit from space. So this way I can inherit my statuses as just with the waterfall that goes from the top down. So I inherited from the space inside my list here. Now with the example of the folder here, if I were to click on the task statuses, you can see that it also says inherit from space. But as we discussed with the waterfall, there is a way for us to set it up on the lower level so it doesn't affect the higher levels of the hierarchy. So for example, with the job openings here, if I click on the 3 dots, I go to task statuses, you can see that I'm using custom statuses. This doesn't affect the folder level statuses or the space level statuses, and it doesn't even affect the lists that are located in the same folder. It only affects the tasks inside the same list. And this is why I recommend everyone to start setting up these 3 main settings of statuses, custom fields, and automations, beginning with the list level first, and then only if necessary, work your way up to the folders and then eventually spaces. And again, only if necessary, because this way it gives you more flexibility and you're able to build more robust structures that again are more adjustable and more flexible to whatever you need it to be inside your ClickUp workspace. I hope this breakdown of the ClickUp hierarchy helps you understand how ClickUp works and how you can design ClickUp structure that aligns with the way you do work inside your company. And keep in mind that waterfall analogy to build the structures that actually are flexible and adjustable to the way you do work. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one very, very soon.